Roger Helmer, UKIP MEP for the East Midlands. We've heard in this report from green groups that there are 30, they've picked out 30 of the dirtiest, what they call the dirtiest coal power stations in Europe. That features a number of power stations in the East Midlands. What's your reaction?
Well, they need something better to do with their time. They're complaining about CO2, they're calling it a pollutant. We need to understand that carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It is a natural, safe, non-toxic, invisible trace gas in the atmosphere that is essential to life. Without CO2 in the atmosphere, we should all die. So let's worry a bit less about CO2 in the atmosphere and worry a bit more about secure and affordable energy, because that's where our problem is.
I mean, they point out two major problems they see with these high, as you say, they call them CO2 pollutant levels. They say it causes environmental problems, but also problems for human health. They point to a whole raft of different illnesses which they say are linked because of these high pollution levels. What would you say to that, considering how high the levels seem to be in the East Midlands?
Well, they're entirely wrong and they're confused. You need to separate two different things. There are CO2 emissions, and as I've said very clearly, CO2 is not a pollutant, it is entirely safe, non-toxic. On the other hand, there are also other emissions of nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, particulates, things of that kind that are damaging to health, no question of it. That is why coal-fired power stations are being equipped or have been equipped with scrubbers and other devices to reduce the amount of pollution. We in UKIP are opposed to pollution. We are in favour of anything that reduces pollution, but we do not accept that CO2 constitutes pollution.
If you're in favour of getting rid of pollution or reducing pollution levels, does that mean that you would accept that perhaps these power stations in the East Midlands need to clean up their act?
Well, of course, we need to retrofit old power stations so that they produce less pollution, and we need to build new coal-fired power stations. You know, the green groups opposed new coal-fired power stations. New coal-fired power stations meet much higher standards and are much cleaner than old ones. We should be building more coal-fired power stations. Do you know the Germans are building or refurbishing 24 new or refurbished coal-fired power stations? They talk about solar energy, they waste vast amounts of money on renewables, but they find they have to build coal because it's secure, it's reliable, it's cheap, and they're importing cheap American coal to drive those power stations. If the Germans can do it, we should be doing it too.
In this report, they talk about efficiency. They say, on average, British coal power stations, these ones that are, they say, very polluting, have an average efficiency of 36%. I mean, that doesn't sound very efficient. Isn't it time to look at these alternatives like wind turbines, like the other green alternatives that they would point to?
Absolutely not. It's time to build new, efficient coal-fired power stations. Of course, if you look at power stations that are old, they're going to be less efficient than power stations that are new. The fact is, renewables are unreliable, they are extremely expensive, they require conventional backup. If you build lots of wind farms, you have to build typically gas-fired power stations in order to provide the backup. They are not a solution. They are pure gesture politics. What we ought to be doing is relying on secure, affordable sources of energy, proven sources of energy, what I like to call grown-up technologies, not playground technologies like solar and windmills.
We're seeing coal production in places like the East Midlands disappear. Is coal, therefore, a reliable, energy secure, does it have an energy secure future that we can rely on?
There are two answers to that question. The first thing is just economics, and sadly it is more expensive to dig out coal in the UK than it is in many other places, including Australia and including America. So as of today, the Germans are importing cheap American coal. They're not going to be asking for expensive British coal. But in terms of long-term energy security, we are reliably informed that in Britain we have available 200 years worth of coal. So if the situation arises where coal is in short supply, where we need domestic supplies of coal, it may be a bit more expensive than the American, but it is there, it can be used. The idea that we're going to run out of coal any minute now is absurd.
To sum up, would you take away from this report some points? Would you say that there are improvements to be made, perhaps efficiency to the power stations we have in the East Midlands, and that it does signal that perhaps something does need to change?
Well, certainly we should be looking at all those power stations to see if there are adjustments, retrofits that we can do that improve the efficiency of them. That's fine. What we should really be doing is building modern coal-fired power stations like the Germans are. And the idea that this report proves that we shouldn't have coal is exactly the reverse of the truth. It means we need modern coal-fired power stations.